Hold on just a second before I get started. I want to say something to you first. If you found your way here, to this channel, watching this video, it's because something in that title reached out and caught you. A word, an image, something that touched a spot you don't show to most people. Maybe you're 70 years old, maybe 80, maybe you're 55 and you're watching this for your mother, your father, who called you last night in that voice you know, and you didn't know what to say back. This channel exists for you, for these stories, for this truth that doesn't get said out loud often enough. If you haven't already, subscribe. Not because I'm asking. It's the part of you that already knows these conversations matter, that there's something here worth hearing. The button's right there under the video. 1 second, and then we go forward together. And this story, if you stay with it all the way through, might change something. My name is Ray Basile, 79 years old, born and raised in New Orleans, in the 9th Ward, in a neighborhood where the houses were so close together you could hear your neighbors' arguments through the wall and smell what they were cooking for supper. My father worked the docks. My mother took in laundry. 5 of us in 4 rooms, and we had nothing, but the nothing was warm, and it smelled like red beans on Monday and fish frying on Friday. I spent 38 years working for the railroad, Union Pacific, out of the New Orleans yard. I rode freight through every corner of this country. I've seen the sun come up over every kind of American landscape, from the Louisiana Bayou to the Nevada Flats to the mountains of Colorado. I learned that this country is big and that people, wherever you find them, carry more or less the same things in their hearts. I had 2 kids. My son Tommy, 53 years old, lives in Houston with his family. My daughter Carol, 48, lives in Atlanta. Both of them fine people, both of them settled, both of them with lives packed full of work and kids and things that need doing yesterday. My wife Agnes died 4 years ago. Cancer, fast, like a freight train that doesn't slow down. From that day on, I've been living alone in this house in New Orleans. And for 3 years, exactly 3 years, I sat here waiting for my children to come home. Let me lay out the count for you right now. Not to make you feel sorry for me. Ray Basile never liked pity, giving it or getting it. I'm doing it because accounts need to be settled clearly. Otherwise, we lie to ourselves. In the year after Agnes died, Tommy came to see me 4 times. Carol 3. Added up, 7 visits in 12 months. 1 every 52 days, roughly. Enough to call it we stay in touch? Depends on how you measure it. If you measure with your heart, no, not enough. But I wasn't measuring with my heart. I was measuring with that part of the brain that doesn't settle down, that replays the tape at night and keeps score like a referee who never blows the final whistle. I'd call Tommy. He'd pick up almost always. We'd talk 10, 15 minutes. He'd ask how I was doing. I'd say fine, even when I wasn't. Because what else do you tell your son who lives 500 miles away and can't do a damn thing about it? You unload the truth on him, and then what? He feels guilty. And guilt doesn't bring anybody closer. It pushes them further away. I'd call Carol. She picked up less often. I'd try again. Sometimes she'd call back the next day. Daddy, I'm sorry, I was tied up. I know, sweetheart. How are you doing? And we'd start all over again. The problem wasn't them. I need to make that clear right now, because if you think this is a speech against your children, you've got the wrong video. The problem was me. What I was doing, day by day, call by call, I was building the saddest and most useless thing a parent can build in front of their children. I was building the father who waits, and the father who waits, slowly and surely, becomes a burden. Not because the children are bad people, but because a weight is a weight, even when you love the person carrying it, even when you feel guilty for feeling it. It was a Sunday in January, the kind of New Orleans winter Sunday that people from up north don't picture when they think of Louisiana. Not cold like Chicago, but gray in a particular way, with that wind off the river that carries damp and loneliness in equal measure. I had cooked. Red beans and rice, the real thing, with andouille sausage and the Holy Trinity. The Monday dish that Agnes made better than anyone alive, and that I had learned to make over 30 years of watching her, without ever once writing anything down. I had cooked for two, the way I still did sometimes, out of habit or out of hope. I'm not sure which. Tommy had said he might come down that weekend. We'll see, Dad. Depends on the kids. The kids were fine. Tommy didn't come. I ate alone. Saved the other plate. Looked at the phone. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I went and got Agnes's journal. She kept one, wrote in it in the evenings while I was watching the news, and we had an unspoken agreement that it was hers, private, off limits. But that night I took it down from the shelf, sat at the table with the leftover red beans in front of me, and started to read. I won't tell you everything that was in it. Some of it is hers alone, and it'll stay that way as long as I'm alive. But there was one page, written about 6 years before she died, on some ordinary evening, that said something that changed me. She was writing about me. She wrote, "Ray doesn't realize that when he waits, he frightens people. He gets that waiting look on his face that makes me anxious too, let alone the kids. How do you tell a man that love doesn't work that way, that it comes on its own when you're not chasing it with that hunger?" I read it 3 times. Then I closed the journal, washed the dishes, and sat in silence for a long time in that kitchen where Agnes had cooked for 40 years, listening to what she had told me 6 years before that I hadn't heard. Let me explain what Agnes understood and what took me 3 more years to figure out after she was gone. When you're starving for presents, for a visit, for a phone call, for a child to come sit at the table with you, that hunger shows. It comes through the phone line. You can hear it in words that sound normal but aren't. How come you didn't make it down this weekend? Sounds like a question, but it's not a question. It's an accusation wearing a question's clothes. And your kids, who have known you since the day they were born, hear it immediately. I think about you all the time. Sounds like tenderness, and part of it is. But when you say it in that voice, that quiet voice, the Tuesday evening voice, when the house has been still all day and the phone hasn't rung once, it becomes something else. It becomes, "I'm looking for you. Where are you? Why aren't you here?" And your kids, your children who are 40, 50, 60 years old, they feel it tighten around them. Not from lack of love, from too much need. Love that asks is different from love that offers. Love that asks says, "I need you. Fill me up." Love that offers says, "I've got something for you. Come get it when you're ready." The first one is a wait. The second one is a pull. For 3 years, I have been practicing the first kind without knowing it. Every phone call was a request. Even when I didn't say so outright. Even when I was talking about the weather or the Saints season. Under every word was the same question. Why aren't you here? That night, with Agnes's journal closed on the table, I decided to stop asking the question. I decided to start building the answer. The next morning, I called my brother Sal. Sal is 75 years old. He lives about 10 minutes from me, and in the 3 years since Agnes died, we had seen each other maybe a dozen times, despite the ridiculous distance. Both of us grieving, both of us in our own silence, both of us waiting for something without knowing quite what. I said, "Sal, tomorrow morning we're going fishing." He paused. Then he said, "Like the old days?" I said, "Like the old days." At 5:30 the next morning we were down at the camp on Lake Bourne with our rods and a thermos of coffee. The water was flat as a tabletop. The sun was coming up slow and red over the marsh. We didn't talk much. Fishermen don't talk. They watch the water and think their own thoughts. But when we headed in, I had a cooler with 4 speckled trout and something in my chest that hadn't been there in years. I had something to tell people about. That evening I called Tommy, not with my usual voice, with the voice of a man who has something to say. "You know I went fishing this morning with your Uncle Sal. First sunrise I'd seen since your mother was alive. Caught 4 speckled trout. I've got them in the pan right now. Cast iron, a little butter, lemon, and capers, the way your grandfather used to do it. Tommy said, "No kidding, you and Uncle Sal?" "Me and Uncle Sal." He brought that thermos of coffee that tastes like he made it 3 days ago. Hasn't changed a bit. He laughed. A real laugh, not the polite laugh kids do when they're trying to seem engaged. He said, "Dad, next time I come down, I want to go with y'all." I said, "When are you coming?" Small pause. Then, "I've got a week free in March." I didn't make a big deal of it. I said, "Good, trout are still running in March." In March, Tommy came, with the grandkids. He stayed 5 days. But it doesn't stop at the fishing trip. The fishing trip was just the start. Because what I had understood, thanks to Agnes, thanks to that page she wrote 6 years before, was a principle that applies to everything, not just your children. The principle is this: people come where there is life. They don't come where there is need. That's not cynicism. That's human nature, plain and honest as it's always been. Moths go to a lit porch light. They don't go to a dark house. Not because moths are cruel, but because they follow the light. If you want your children to come to you, you have to become a place worth coming to. A place that has something. Something to eat, something to hear, something to learn, something to laugh about. I started cooking like I hadn't cooked in years. Not for them, and this is the crucial point, for myself. I dug out my mother's recipes, the ones I had stopped making, because they took all day, and it didn't seem worth the trouble just for one man. A proper gumbo, the real thing, dark roux and okra and file powder. Biscuits from scratch on Saturday morning. A shrimp boil on the back porch on Friday nights, spread out on newspaper the way my father used to do, with corn and potatoes and enough cayenne to make your eyes water. To the French market, Tuesday and Saturday mornings. Not just to buy what I needed, but to be there, to talk to the vendors I've known for 20 years, to find out how the week went for the woman who sells Creole tomatoes and whose husband's been having trouble with his back. I went back to dominoes at the club, every Thursday afternoon with the same 4 old men I've been playing with since the 90s. We argue. We accuse each other of cheating without any evidence. We relitigate the same disputes we've been relitigating for 30 years. I laugh more in those 2 hours than in the whole rest of the week. And I did something completely new, something I had never done in my life before. I started telling stories. Right here, on this phone. Stories from my years on the railroad. Stories about my father on the docks. Stories about New Orleans, the neighborhood, the people, the ones who aren't here anymore. I tell them the way I'd tell them to a friend over a cold beer on the porch. No fancy setup, no tricks, just the voice and the story. And people listen. Not just my kids, people I've never met, on the other side of a screen, in cities I've never been to, who write to me, "Ray, this sounds exactly like my grandfather. Ray, I cried. Ray, I read this to my mother." I became useful to the world again, not because anyone asked me to be, because I understood I had something to give. Carol came in August. I hadn't asked her to, hadn't hinted at it. A few weeks before, I had sent her a text message. "Carol, I wrote down your grandmother's gumbo recipe for the first time in my life. Full instructions, all the steps. Whenever you want it, it's yours." 2 weeks later, she called, "Daddy, can I come down on the 12th? She came with her kids, my grandchildren, who I'd been seeing too little of, and who in those days filled my house with that particular sound of children, that chaotic, alive noise you cannot buy at any price. I taught her the gumbo. We spent a whole afternoon in the kitchen, arguing amiably about how dark to take the roux, about whether you add the okra at the beginning or the end, about all those tiny and essential details that are the real inheritance a family passes down. My daughter looked at me at one point, hands covered in flour, apron already a lost cause, and she said, "Daddy, you seem good." It wasn't a question. It was an observation. I said, I am good, sweetheart. And this time it was true without any reservation. The difference, the real concrete difference between that summer and the 3 years before it, wasn't that my children had changed. They hadn't changed. They were the same kids with the same full lives and the same real obligations. I had changed. I had gone from being someone who was waiting to being someone who was living. And living, really living, with curiosity and your hands in the work and stories to tell, does something specific to the people around you. It draws them in. Not by obligation, not by guilt. It draws them in the way a lit porch draws moths on a summer night. Let me tell you what I know now, not what I thought I knew at 40, 50, 60. Those were ideas. These are things learned with my body, with time, with mistakes. I know that the loneliness of old age is not solved by your children's phone calls. It's solved by your own life, the one you build, the one you keep burning, the one you stoke every day the way you stoke a fire. I know that children don't come where there is need. They come where there is life. That's not their fault. That's nature. I know that the pain of the silence, that silence I know, the Sunday evening silence, when the house is empty and the phone hasn't made a sound, that pain is not solved by filling the silence with desperate calls. It's solved by filling it with something real, a smell, a sound, a project, a person, a story. I know it is never too late. At 79 years old, I learned to fish with my brother the way our father taught us when we were boys. I learned to tell stories in a way I'd never tried before. I rediscovered cooking as an act of love toward myself before it was love toward anyone else. I know that Agnes was right. She always was. And I'm glad I read that journal on that January night, even though it made me cry in a way I hadn't cried since I was a child. Those slow tears that don't stop, that just roll down on their own, like they've been waiting for the right moment for years. She had seen me. She had understood me, and she had found a way to tell me, even from the other side. That is real love. Not the love that asks, but the love that sees. And you, who are still here, who listened all the way to the end, you with the children far away, the quiet house, the still phone, get up. Not for them, for you first. Do one thing today. One thing, small, concrete. Call an old friend you've been meaning to call. Cook something that takes all day. Go buy something you don't need, but that makes you happy. Tell somebody a story. Light the porch light. Don't wait for them to come. Turn it on for you. When the porch light is on, when the house has warmth and smell and sound, your children feel it. Maybe not right away. Maybe not all at the same time. But they feel it. And they come. Not out of duty. Not out of guilt. They come because they want to be somewhere warm. I'm Ray Basile, 79 years old, New Orleans, Louisiana. I've got trout in the cast iron and the back door open.